Ah.
Welcome back, Ryan.
Thank you. I just did a long breath hold because I'm practicing my free diving.
Free diving.
How's do you like free diving?
No. I've dived, but I've dived with scuba.
Yeah.
I find that if you dive with the air, you tend to die. I have, on a couple of occasions, found that I've run out of air at some depth.
Oh, really?
One was because of my own stupidity, because I wasn't watching what the tank was, and I knew it was reasonably empty, but I was concentrating on a crayfish, and I was manoeuvring, and I went in there and grabbed it, and as I grabbed it, I took my last breath, and I'm going, holy goodness gracious me, this is not good.
Wow.
Didn't
expect this.
Yeah, but I was all right. I had a buddy watching me, so we were able to buddy breathe, but that wasn't smart. And the other one was faulty equipment, unbeknown to myself, that my tank or my regulator was free-flowing. So suddenly no air. But again, I was diving with a buddy, so it was no problem. So the lesson there is always dive with a buddy.
Oh, fair.
Yeah,
all right,
don't free dive or dive by yourself, because if something goes wrong, you're dead.
Yeah, shallow water blackout, because you actually suppress your need to breathe, so you don't actually know, you just pass out.
Well, that's the thing too. When you run out of air, you don't hold your breath. You have to let your breath go out.
Yeah, I was going to test you on that, because as you go down, the pressure increases your lungs, but then when you go up... And in fact,
as you go up, there's no air in your tank down deep, but as you go up, there is a bit there to get you through. So, and the moral on that is, two things. One, don't dive alone, dive with a buddy. The second is don't panic. Something happens, just don't panic, relax, and just quietly work it out.
Wow, okay, well, welcome to Quick Breathing Finance, where you need to buddy up. That's why we're buddying up with this financial question we have now.
Well, you need advice. That's the buddy, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you could be at the bottom of the ocean if you didn't have that advice.
Yep.
I've seen the video. That's sad. They got caught in a current and couldn't get back up, and they videoed it. But that's dark. So let's go on the question today, and it's long, so I'll summarize it. I'll read it and then summarize it. I invested $5,000 in a crowd-funded startup company in 2016 with the knowledge that I could well lose the money, but also with the high hopes that it would pay off. The company has gone into liquidation with no acknowledgement or notice to investors, apart from the obligatory. Wow.
Obligatory.
Obligatory?
No, obligatory.
You say obligatory?
Yeah.
Obligatory, I say.
Yeah. Well, it depends what borstal you went to.
Yeah, well, I'm well-travelled.
Mine was a very good borstal.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
So it's obligatory.
Well, I went over. Yep. All right. It's American pronunciation I'll go with. Gazette notice. Who reads those on a daily basis? I learned of the... who reads those on a daily basis? Question mark. I'm making a meal of this. I learned of the company failure via an NZ Herald News article. I've submitted an unsecured creditor's claim form, but received no acknowledgement or update from the liquidator, who in this case has a conviction for tax fraud according to the Herald article. Everything you read in the paper is true. After returning my creditor's claim form, I heard nothing, and so after a time I emailed both the company founder, who was extremely friendly and open with the communication both by phone and email when he wanted money, and the liquidator. I did not even get the courtesy of a reply. I have since learnt that the directors of a failed company can choose a liquidator, and almost anyone can be appointed, and that the liquidator does not even need to be a professional. With no transparency and no requirement to keep investors informed, I see this area as urgently needing a review and new laws put in place. To be courted as an investor in a second funding round at a time when it now appears the company was already struggling, and then left completely in the dark as to what has happened, is unacceptable and open to fraud. And now as we wrap this up, further, when it is a small, uncomplicated company, probably with no assets, why is a liquidator appointed at all? If money was available for investors, it would certainly be used to first pay the liquidator's fees. Why isn't an accountant able to wind up an uncomplicated company, which might result in at least some money being available for investors? So a lot of people don't realize the financial hierarchy of how people get paid, and this is why you can potentially lose all your money in a company. But what would you have to say on that, Greg?
Well, it could start the bottom of the way. In respect to liquidation, it can be an accountant. if no liquidator is appointed, and the liquidator is normally appointed by either the secured or unsecured creditors, if nothing is done, it falls into the Justice Department, and basically the company is wound up through that process there. So there is a fallback position, but let's go back to the beginning and say, well, what's this all about? Well, there's an old saying there, isn't there? A fool and their money are soon parted. And I hope this person's not listening, because they might not like me calling them a fool.
No one's going to ask questions.
But, you know, if the hat fits, wear it. $5,000, I mean, you might be in a position where you can afford to speculate on $5,000, and, I suppose you could make money in a crowd-funded type arrangement. I think often that's a little bit about what you do for a charity, or to help some poor, unfortunate person or couple. Crowdfunding for investment, or for, and I don't call it investment, it's really speculation, is not something that I'd recommend or do. For a number of reasons. One, if you're going to put money into something, you want to know who are the people involved. What's their credibility, what's their track record. You'd also like to know, what's happening with that money, how is it going to be utilised within the business. And you should do that. Now, that doesn't make it an investment, it's still a speculation. You've got to go in on the basis that I might lose all my money. And if you've got money that you're quite happy to lose on something like that, all well and good. Most people haven't. Most people actually would like to get their money back with a return. And that's certainly what this person who wrote in wanted. But I think they were getting a little bit ahead of themselves, because they were already counting the winnings before the race had actually been run. Now, it was because of people doing these sort of things more in the 80s than the 90s or the 2000s that I got into the corporate fraud unit of the Justice Department as an investigating accountant. And I saw these sort of things happening where people they thought investing, I would say speculating, into something they didn't understand. In those days, there needed to be a proper process. There needed to be a prospectus issued by the promoters of the project. So you at least had some comeback as to who they were, what their track record was, and what were they going to do with the money. This person shouldn't have been surprised to find that the money was all gone. It was always going to be all gone anyway. It sounds like the people they're dealing with were a bit dodgy, to say the least, and possibly even if it won, they would have lost because they would have run away with the benefit. For them to be able to appoint a liquidator, that means they must have taken some prior security, which is something that companies used to do a little bit. So if you think about the hierarchy, there's the shareholders that put money in, well, that's risk capital. They're the last to get money out if there's any money to be got out. Then there's the creditors, either unsecured or secured, and then they rank next. But what some people did would actually put money into a business that they were the major shareholder of, but put it in giving themselves prior security over everyone else through a debenture. Now, that meant if something went wrong, they had the power through that debenture to appoint a liquidator. And in doing so, they were trying to get ahead of the other creditors, secured or unsecured, particularly the unsecured creditors. And to me, that was always immoral. It wasn't illegal. It was certainly immoral. And I would never put money into a company where that was the situation. If the promoter was taking the same risk as the rest of us, you might be prepared to do that as a speculation. But where they're taking some prior security, that's immoral. It's not fraud. It's immoral, and that's another reason why if you're going to put money into something like this, you need to have all information. You need to see the financial statements, and that would tell you where you would rank. What are the creditors? Who are the secured creditors? And if the promoter or person who started up the business is one of those, you just quickly walk away, because that's not kosher. So I don't know what to say to this person other than understand the difference between investment and speculation. They did kind of understand they could lose their money, so they shouldn't have been too surprised when that happened. It's not something I'd recommend. And if you've got money that you don't need to spend or to reduce debt, that you want to put aside for the future to invest, there's lots of ways of doing that without doing something like crowdfunding. You could go to a managed fund. You don't need to go necessarily to an advisor. You could go to a managed fund with a reputable fund manager and put money into, because you're more growth and income orientated, into one of their growth funds. And sit tight and let it compound away. But I would say at some point you need to step back and get the proper advice, which is, why are you doing this? What's the end goal? If the end goal is to help fund your retirement lifestyle, you're going to need a lot more than $5,000.
Yeah, you're going to up the ante. The other important thing is, what's it worth if no one will buy it? You've got to have a market for what you own. So on that note, rate, review, and subscribe, because we're going to continue pumping out this value, and it's only going to get better.
And make sure you're not a fool who's about to lose their money.
Yeah.
A fool and their money is soon parted.
And he's got all the one-liners. And if you would like your one-liners to sound as good as Greg's, you got to read a few books and talk to a few people. But most importantly, on the audio, it's nzaudioeditors.com. nzaudioeditors.com. And if you want to learn how to not read properly, just send me an email at ryan@oneplan.co.nz. Thanks, guys.
Is that obligatory?
I don't even know what that means. Thanks, guys. Oh, no, obligatory, yeah. I'm with you now, yeah. Obligatory.
Obligatory.
Good one, you nailed that.
Yeah.
I'm going to roast you on this question.
Wind it up.